Hello, everybody. Here with you, Veganic Grower, and here we are, another show. And what's really cool is today, this afternoon, it is our 20th. Wow, how do you like that? 18 last year. This is our second one this year. So very, very cool. So I want to say hello to Peaches and Sugar and Veg Meg and her sprouts, which is very cool. Welcome, my sprout friend. Here in Quebec, in Boileau, it is minus 10 degrees Celsius, chilly, snowing. Not a huge snowstorm, but enough that we had to get the snow shovels out this morning. So anyway, welcome everybody out there. So it has been really for us an amazing couple of weeks with the launch of the Veganic Growers Handbook. And if anybody out there hasn't bought it yet, here it is. Go get it. You can find it at any independent bookstore in Canada, through Amazon Canada, through Amazon US, through many, many independent bookstores in the United States. If you haven't picked it up, you will be very, very, very pleasantly surprised. They say everywhere it's 250 pages. It's actually 324. So you get a lot of bang for your buck. So it won't sell you short. I'm telling you now, pick it up. We are moving on up in the world. We have a fun analytics that we look at that ranks us on a bestseller list in Canada of the 11 million books that are out there. And currently we're number 45,000. Anyways, it's kind of fun because we just keep moving up about 1,000 spaces every day. So we're hoping to keep on going. Anyway. Thank you to all of you all who have already bought the book and have supported and sent such encouraging messages to me, telling you how you've liked it or what you've thought of it. This is what makes it all special to me. So thank you. So today we are talking about seed starting, the all-important seed starting of all of the vegetables and fruits and herbs that we would want to start inside. We're going to talk about diversity of homestead income streams and how to market if you do want to sell. So let's kick it off. So seed starting, there really is nothing going to be that novel about this other than every year as professional growers and all of you out there who do it, every year, you really need to follow the same steps. It's always going back to the basics and making sure we're doing everything correctly. So what are those basic steps? Well, the keys are heat, light, or sometimes none, moisture, and soil. You need good seeds, and you need some sort of seed pot, tray, block, whatever to hold your soil so that your little seeds can sprout. Again, we're going back to basics. So if you've done this 1,000 times before, like we have, or 1,000,000 times before, like we have, anyway, it comes down to the basics. Every time we start with the basics. So let's start with the veganic potting mix. I shared on my Facebook page and I shared on the discussion of this event my seed starting mix. And there might be some people out there that have questions about this ingredient or that ingredient. So we're actually going to discuss every single one of the ingredients so that we know what we're talking about. But no matter what it is that you're looking for a veganic potting mix, you should be able to find it all at your local nursery. You should not have to order it online unless you absolutely want to. About the only thing in my personal mix that we have to order in is organic soybean meal from Down to Earth Organics. And other than that, everything else, our local nursery now carries alfalfa meal, which they hadn't before, but they do, and they carry everything else. So should be the same wherever you are. These are all basically standard ingredients. They're just formulated in my special way. So if you have my book, you're lucky already, because on page 45, I actually have the recipe step by step by step by step, and I talk all about it. If you don't have it, there you go. Also, you can look on the Facebook page, on my Facebook page, and the ingredients are there, and the recipe is there. The one thing that I'm going to do to make it simpler, in my book, I have an ingredient called vermiculite. Now, vermiculite is a mined material like perlite. They're both volcanic rocks, but the difference between perlite and perlite actually sheds water while vermiculite holds water. Well, if we're using a peat mix or a coconut coir mix, then we don't need to have really any additional ingredient that's going to suck up water. Really, things like vermiculite are necessary if you're using like a chip branch wood mix, or you're using all of veganic compost mix, because sometimes veganic compost can be quite sandy, and for them to hold water or bind, they don't bind as well unless they have something like vermiculite in there to hold that water. But for this particular mix, you could actually take it out. So there you go. I just saved you some money. You don't need to put the vermiculite in your mix unless you absolutely want to. I still have a sack of it on hand, so I put a little bit in, and it just helps, again, bind the minerals, the water together, so the little plant's roots have something that they can grip onto. Just like that. That's what they do. All right. So starting with peat moss. There's a lot of concern about the use of peat moss, especially in the UK, in the upper UK, and in Ireland, Scotland, where they have where the peatlands have just been ravaged. There is a movement in the UK to have completely peatless mixes, and I'm all for it. I really wish there were compost companies in the United States and Canada that have thought about this and have decided to try to create peatless soil mixes and not change peat for coconut coir, because here coconuts come from either further away. From the UK, it's really across land. For us, it's across land and then water and then gets here. And I really do feel that coconuts take away from the local populations that are growing them from a major food source. So I'm not a fan of coconut coir here in North America. If you want to use it in Europe and you think it's close and it seems like it's easy, great. I have never liked coconut coir. I had bought some because I was all about it in the beginning. Oh, I'm not going to use peat, I'm going to use coconut coir. And I had coconut coir sort of get recycled from one compost pile to another for almost 4 or 5 years. It just did not break down. And I thought that was really bizarre. Whereas a peat mix, you put the peat in, you put it in your ground, and you don't have any more peat. Like the peat is gone. It just infuses with the land. There you go. That's what we're going to go with. I mean, I guess the difference is peat is actually coming from the soil, whereas coconut coir is actually coming from the outer shell of a nut. So maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. But let's talk about peat here in North America anyway. So if you've read my book, it has all the statistics in there. Otherwise, I'm going to tell you. In Canada, to date, we have used less than 0.03% of our peatlands. That's how much has been harvested. We have over 25% of the world's peatlands. So this is interesting to me because up until about maybe 30 years ago, there were no environmental standards about how to extract or what we were going to do. People didn't care as much. They're like, oh, we can make, well, let's say 40 years ago, we can make whatever money we can make on peat. Let's do it. Let's bring it in. But somehow they knew. Somehow maybe it was too expensive to extract. Maybe there were no roads. That was probably the biggest problem. There were no roads, and there was really no way to do it sustainably. So they only took the lands that they could get to and access easily, which is great for wildlife because the ones that aren't accessed for easily are kept for all the flora and fauna that want to live there. Whereas the ones that are closer to roads, it's already got a road to it. So maybe we can use it. So 0.03%, that is nothing in comparison to the total. But the peatlands in Canada are getting ravaged and they are getting destroyed. But it isn't by the horticulture industry. It's getting destroyed by the oil and gas industry. And right now, currently, legislation underway in Canada to ravage the peatlands up in Nunavut for what? Essential minerals for electric cars and cell phones. So if you're really worried about peat, it kind of comes down to everything else. Like if you're really worried about saving the Amazon rainforest, stop eating animals, stop raising soy in the Amazon rainforest, best thing you can do. If you're really worried about peatlands in Canada, dump your cell phone and don't buy an electric car, and use communal transport as best as possible. So there you go. You know, there's always other stories, and the horticulture industry is not taking away from people. So it was Ian Tolhurst who actually said in an interview, and I thought this was really interesting, that nothing holds water as good as peat moss. So we can learn to limit our usage while we're figuring out how to create a more sustainable mix. And there can be more sustainable mixes out there, made with chip branch wood, made with leaf molds, made with veganic composts. But to me, so far, they haven't worked right. So if you want to be successful today, if you want to start your season, there are people that are already started their seedlings and that are going to continue to do so. If you want to be successful today, use your peat moss, especially if you're in the United States and Canada, because all of it comes from here. Well, I hope I made my point. So you have peat. Peat is for water retention and for nitrogen. It actually does have nitrogen. Our soils here in Boileau, Quebec are actually really peaty. So we actually have a high soil organic matter. So that is what is also going into your seeding mix. You're going to get a lot of organic matter from using that peat. Lime, because peat is acid and you want to sort of alkalize your soils so that all the little seedlings, when they start growing, they don't have a problem absorbing the nutrients that are in there. So by adding dolomite lime, which will bring you potassium, calcium, and magnesium. I haven't really tried it with wood ash. You could, but wood ash is pretty strong. You could instead, though, put wood ash in with your peat moss, and it will alkalize the peat moss also. I haven't tried it. Maybe I'm going to try that this year. The dolomite lime and the wood ash also have extra micronutrients, so that works out well. I think that in dolomite lime case, you have manganese, and there is iron. In wood ash, you actually have boron, which is really, really important for our brassica family of crops. Okay, continuing. Colloidal rock phosphate. It's an old, ancient bed fossilized rock that has been extracted in certain places in the United States to create phosphate. Now, both the dolomite lime, you only use a half a cup for a huge wheelbarrow, and phosphate or phosphorus, you only use a fifth of a cup. So it's not very much. And there are concerns out there that we're running out of phosphorus, and it's true. We're talking about industrial grade, conventionally used phosphorus, not colloidal rock phosphate, but eventually if we continue to use it, we'll run out. But for now, everything is okay. And this gives you phosphorus, and that is going to be very important for a couple of nutrient deficiency issues that we're going to talk about as we continue on. So you add all that to a potting mix or your own veganic compost. I like using potting mix because it kind of adds as a filler, and it just kind of fills up the pot, so you're not using more just straight peat moss. You have a potting mix which is like the remnants of the peat moss, so it's using all of it. Also some dark humus. Sometimes there's some composted humus in there, or composted forest materials in there. But just make sure when you're buying a potting mix that there's absolutely no natural fertilizer. When I say natural fertilizer, it means there's some sort of animal fertilizer in there. After that, you have soybean meal for your nitrogen intake. That has 6-0-0, so it's 6 parts nitrogen per weight, 0 phosphorus, 0 potassium. But that is really important for when your little seedlings start growing. See, I don't have like a seed starting mix and then a potting mix. It's basically the same mix because it was just more convenient and easy to do that. And I was, even though even some seed catalogs, they'll tell you, myth busting, some seed, they'll tell you, you shouldn't start your tomatoes in a mix that has fertilizer. Don't do that. Start it in you can. It's fine. It doesn't matter. We grow great tomato starts. As the picture on this event shows, like it isn't necessary for you to have 2 different mixes. You can just have the one. It just makes it easier for everyone who's trying to do this correctly. Alfalfa meal, which has nitrogen and potassium. Now, the numbers on this is 2.50, 2.5 per weight. And I didn't feel when I first made this mix, because I didn't want to use the soybean meal because I couldn't get it locally. I felt it just wasn't enough of a nitrogen boost when the plants were getting to the point before they were going to be transplanted outside. So when we transplant our tomatoes up, they still stay in their little 3.5-inch pots for about 2.5, 3 weeks inside the greenhouse, and they needed just a little bit more nitrogen to get them until they went outside. I mean, they're very heavy feeding, the little seedlings, when they start. So the soybean really did that. The alfalfa meal did not. But alfalfa meal also has micronutrients, which is cool. You also add dried seaweed meal, and seaweed meal has phytohormones that actually help the plant in their root stage development. So, or in the stage of their root development. So it will allow those roots to create little root hairs off the main roots themselves that will allow them to more efficiently pick up the other nutrients that they need. So that's very important why we want to put the seaweed meal in there. And then mycorrhizae. Now, some potting mixes actually have the mycorrhizae in it. The mycorrhizae creates those filaments of mycorrhizae, or those fungal filaments in the potting mix, which, as we know from our readings and our research, it's the mycorrhizae that act as the neural highway, as the highway for nutrients as well. So the plant's roots will ask for what it is they need, and the mycorrhizae will deliver it from one place to another. Which is just super amazing. It happens in pots. It happens outside. It's very neat how this happens. So then you need to decide, once you have your potting mix all put together, once you mix it all together and you have it in your big blue bin or your wheelbarrow, you need to decide where you want to put it in before you start your little seeds. I use a seed blocking mechanism, which you can find from Johnny's Selected Seed, that was developed by Elliot Coleman, who is one of our great leaders in the organic movement. And it's a very interesting system, because you can make your potting mix and then you press down with this sort of metal contraption and it creates standing blocks. The thing I didn't like about it, and I don't use it anymore today, is because I really felt like the potting mix had to be just right. It had to be the right consistency. It had to have the right amount of clay. And at that point, we're using worm castings, which would bring that clay ingredient, which we don't use as veganic farmers. And it would, if it was too wet, they wouldn't hold correctly. If it was too dry, it would crumble away. Or if it's too wet, it would be too dense. If it was too dry, it would crumble away. So I don't use those anymore. But if you use them, if you like them, great. I use kind of a 50-cell plastic tray. They've been going strong now for almost 9 years. I have not put any into the recycling yet. They're very durable. They sit in what's called a seedling tray, a 1020 seeding tray. This is basically standard on all farms. So if you're a farmer out there, you know what I'm talking about. These are standard. They're extremely durable as well. They fit right inside. It makes a really efficient system. I'm not saying I love plastic. I don't. I wish it was all recycled plastics. Like I talked about before, hey, plastic people, go ahead and keep fishing it out of the oceans. And please make all of these plastic materials from now on out of recycled ocean plastic. Hope you're out there. Yet, this is what I like for now. I find it to be efficient. I find it clean. You can go ahead and wash them. You can stack them at the end of the season. They're not indestructible, but they act like it, and we beat them up pretty good by starting our seedlings and in the greenhouse and moving them around. So take your pick, what you like. Those are my two mechanisms. You can use other things like paper pots, or I wouldn't use the little peat pots that pull away. That doesn't seem to work. You can use any kind of recycled material you have around. It's just something that's going to hold your soil well, that's deep enough for the little seedling and wide enough depending on what you're doing. I leave it up to you. You can do whatever you feel is best. So your seeds. Now, all seeds have a life expectancy. And I don't know if any of you all know this. So some seeds, like onions and leeks, and parsnips, they're really only viable for only about 2 years. After that, their viability goes down. Their germination rate automatically goes down to almost 50%. So if you have old seed lying around and you're wondering why, and I've seen actually farmers do this too. If you're wondering why you're not getting the germination you could, well, it's possible that you have your seeds are just too old. Some seeds, interestingly, can be quite a bit older. Tomatoes, peppers, eggplants can last 10 years. Dry beans, I've actually planted dry beans that were over 100 years old. So it really depends on the seed. It really depends on the condition as they were kept. If they were kept in a dark place, if they're kept in a dark place, if they're kept dry, if they're kept relatively cold, so like below 10 degrees Celsius or 50 degrees Fahrenheit, you're going to have excellent luck with germination in the following year. Just know that there are certain particular varieties that you will, that only have a certain amount of life to them. Okay. So heat, light or no, and moisture. These are really the three keys. This is why you're going to succeed or fail. Every single seed also has a germination temperature that it desires. So I have here marked in my book onions, because for me and us soon here in about 3 weeks, we're going to start our onions. And onions want and I have it written here. There you go. I have onions, peaceful vegan. Any tips for successful tomato plants in the Sacramento area with the very hot weather we have gotten the last few summers? I got a few tomatoes. Yeah, I will give you a tip. Give me a second. So 60 to 80 Fahrenheit is what onions want to germinate at, or 15.5 to 26.5 Celsius. They take about 6 to 10 days. Why is that important? So if you have your temperatures lower than that 15 degrees Celsius or 60 degrees, it's going to take them a longer time to germinate, and they might rot. If you have that temperature higher than that, then they might just kind of burn up. So there really is a temperature range for every single one. And if you're having trouble starting your seeds, this could be the one reason. Light or no, most seeds, the bigger they are, they don't need light. The smaller they are, usually they do need light. So if you're talking things like a lot of your herbs like chamomile or oregano or stinging nettles, some of your smaller fruits like ground cherries, all of these want to sit in the light to germinate. Something in their DNA, and the ectoplasm, in their cells, that they wish to have that amount of sunlight beating on them in order for them to germinate. It'll just spark them to germinate. Whereas other things like tomatoes really do not need to have any kind of light to germinate. They can, but they don't need it. So there you go. Moisture, constant moisture for germination. Every single seed wants to be moist. It can even be wet until it germinates. As long as the temperature is correct, as long as the notification of light or dark is correct, then even if the soil is too wet, it won't matter. They will still germinate. The problem we're going to get into later is when we keep the moisture too much when the little seedling is growing. With the heating, I have used two different systems. In Arizona, I used a heat mat system, but also lights up above. And here, I kind of do the same. It's just a heated system on the bottom, and then the light is from the greenhouse lighting when the sun comes out or when the light comes up. But I don't give them light at night. So heating from the bottom is going to give you the better chance for your little seedlings to germinate, your little seeds to germinate. It'll just keep the trays warmer. If the heat that you're giving them is only from the top, you're going to have less luck. And if the light that they're getting is only from the top and there is no bottom heat, then what's going to happen is your plants can also have a tendency to get quite leggy. And you don't want a leggy plant. That means that it's going to have a very long stem and a few leaves on top. What you want is a nice, robust stem. The more robust the stem, it means the bigger the root system underneath. If you have a long, thin stem, then what's happening is you have roots that are going down looking for whatever it is that they want. They're either looking for heat, looking for moisture, looking for nutrients. Also keep in mind that nutrient uptake will only happen with the moisture at the proper level once the seedlings sprout. So if it's too wet, they're not going to be able to uptake nutrients, or their little roots are going to go down. Keep going through the pot, through the container, through whatever you have to look for whatever nutrients that they want. If it's too dry, well, they're just going to shrivel up. Let me see if I can answer your question. Any tips for successful tomato plants in the Sacramento, California area where the very hot weather we have gotten the last few summers? I got a few tomatoes. Yeah, so there's a really good seed company not far away from you I believe they're in Oregon. It's called Territorial Seeds. My stepfather, he also lives in California. He lives in Danville, which doesn't get up to 100 all the time, but gets pretty hot, and he has pretty good luck with tomatoes. So look in that seed catalog and see what they say, especially for heat loving. Now, when I was in Arizona, my temperatures were extremely hot also. And I had really a lot better luck with determinate tomatoes than I did with indeterminate tomatoes. Now, determinate tomatoes are a tomato that is a small bushy plant, gives you a lot of fruit set at the same time. We have one here called Mountain Princess that we sell and that we grow, and it does really, really well. The indeterminate plants are going to get really, really, really bushy. And depending on the fertility of your soil, so if you have a lot of organic matter and if you have a lot of nitrogen in your soil, you're going to get this amazingly big, bushy plant with no tomatoes. Whereas, because that's kind of what it does. Like, it's going to push out foliage and push out foliage and push out foliage. And then when it's done pushing out its foliage, it's then going to say, oh, okay, wait a minute, it's time to put out a tomato. But a determinate plant is different. It's sensed different. It's in its cellular levels, it's different. It wants to put out tomatoes right away because that's what it wants to do. So you're going to get a nice healthy plant, and then automatically it's going to put out flowers, fruit set, and you're going to get a load of tomatoes. So depending what you tried before, either send me a message to veganicgrower@gmail.com or send the message here, and I'm more than happy to help you. If you're growing just indeterminate tomato plants, try determinate tomato plants. If you've done determinate tomato plants and what I'm saying just absolutely makes no sense, then go the other way around. Do indeterminate plants, but try not to over-fertilize your plant. I've heard this a lot before. People get really bushy plants. So I would also need to know, are your plants good looking? Are they wilting in the sun? I know that I had somebody else who was up in Redding who I consulted last year that said they used to put shade cloth over their tomatoes. When it got, sometimes in Sacramento, you can get up to 110. So you can get dry. Now, I never had to do this in Arizona, and I could even grow tomatoes in a greenhouse just fine without a shade cloth. And so we're talking 120 degrees. I mean, it was hot, and tomatoes really shouldn't mind, but they need to be well established first. So you need to make sure that they do have that nice thick stem and they are growing well. And that's going to require you to prepare your soil correctly. So there's quite a lot of issues with that question. Should we be using liquid fertilizer on our seedlings? I don't use liquid fertilizer in our field, so it really depends on your soil. So if you tell us what, depends on your soil mix. If you're using soybean meal and alfalfa meal in your mix, and in California, you should be able to get both of those products, no problem, because Down to Earth is from California, then no, you don't. The biggest thing about tomato seedlings, though, and this is where a lot of seed magazines will steer you wrong also, myth busting, you don't want to have tomatoes in their pots for over about 5 to 6 weeks. 6 weeks is max. And I'm talking from the time you start to the time they grow. Okay, so if you're using a bag seed starter, then it doesn't have enough nutriment in there. You're gonna want to use my recipe that's on this on my Facebook page, or again, if you send me an email, I'm more than happy to send it to you. So you're gonna want to put in there some sort of nitrogen fertilizer for your tomato plants, because that's what they're gonna want in their little pots. Tomatoes, specifically, since we're on the topic, they take about 4 to 7 days to germinate. They're going to stay in their little tiny cells, whatever the little cells are, for about 2 weeks maximum. As soon as they put on their two first real leaves, not the dicotyledon, but the two first real leaves, then you can pot them up to a bigger container, a 3.5 or 4-inch pot or 4.5-inch pot, whatever you have around. After that, no more than 3 weeks before you put it outside. So let's say in Sacramento, let's see, my dad is in Walnut Creek outside of Oakland, California. He plants his tomatoes the end of March. So if you haven't started them yet, start your seeds now. Start your seeds today. In 5 weeks, you're talking the first week of April, you should be fine. Don't wait too long in Sacramento. I don't think it gets, I think your weather is pretty much the same. I don't think you get below 50 degrees Fahrenheit in April. If you do, wait another week, but that's what I would recommend. Go ahead and start them now. Put some nitrogen-rich fertilizer like soybean meal, but also one that has potassium, and make sure for tomatoes they have phosphorus. So find a little bit of rock phosphate. There's actually a mix out there also done by Down to Earth called a vegan mix, and it is all vegan. It's all veganic ingredients. And the numbers are 3-3-3. So you actually have 3 parts phosphorus per weight in that mix. So that's more than enough phosphorus for your little plants to not have phosphorus uptake. So I'm going to talk about that now. Okay, so your tomato gets get huge. You have indeterminate. I would look at territorial. I would look quickly and see if you can find determinate tomato seeds. We have them here at La Ferme de l'Aube. If you know our little seed company, I have one red and one yellow. I have red Mountain Princess. It gives us like 30 tomatoes per plant. And I have a taxi, a yellow tomato that also I have a friend who lives in Quebec City who grows it on his balcony. And we get something like 30, 35, 40 tomatoes per plant. So if you want those, let us know, contact me. I'm more than happy to send them to you. So if they get huge, you're probably giving them too much nitrogen fertilizer. This is the thing. You want to stress your tomato plants out in order for them to produce tomatoes for you. You don't want to be too nice to them once they're growing. When they're seedlings, yes, but when they're growing, no, you kind of want to be a little bit mean to them. So I hope that's it. Tomatoes are a whole thing, but once you get it right the first time, you're going to get it. Yeah, you're welcome. It's my pleasure. Okay, so moving on. Okay, so 2 things you need to really think about when you're starting your seeds and after they start germinating. So, well, maybe not 2, but 3. So when they've germinated, when they've reached the point where they start growing, you start seeing their true first leaves, you really need to diminish the water. The watering will kill your little seedlings. The too much water you give, and really this has been all of our problem when we've had issues with seedlings, is that we overwater them too much. Really, when they reach that stage, they can go basically bone dry before we give them more water. So if you do that, then they will uptake the nutrients that they need, and then they'll be fine. If you just keep watering them, like every time you see the top of the soil dry, the middle of the soil on the bottom is probably still wet. But if it's dry on top and you water and water and water, those little seedlings are only going to get so big, and eventually they're just going to stop. They're just going to be stunted, and that's what we don't want. We're trying to avoid that. So as they get bigger, the less water they need. But when you water thoroughly. So if you're using trays or those soil blocks, like you might have to pass 3 or 4 times to get the whole entire block wet after it's been dry. Because if it's a peat mix, it's hard for the peat to reabsorb the water. Or even if it's another kind of mix like leaf mold or chip branch wood, it still is going to have a tough time absorbing the water. It might just percolate right through. So think about that when you're watering. The bigger the seedling are, the less water it needs. All seedlings are going to want 10 to 12 hours of light. So this is really important if you have a small homestead and you're growing inside. Sorry if I missed this, but how many hours per day? Yeah, you need 10 to 12 hours per day of light. No less. Not 6, not 8, 10 to 12. And this is kind of like what they're going to see when they go outside. Pretty much anywhere in North America, they're going to start having 10, 12, here, even 16 hours of light. So 10 to 12 hours is the minimum amount of light. If they get 13, 14, that's not a big deal. They don't need to have light all night, but they definitely need to have enough light during the day. You don't want to have your little seedlings, doesn't matter what it is, when they're in that first dicotyledon stage or that first two true leaf stage, you don't want to see those temperatures go below 60 Fahrenheit or 15.5 Celsius. If you do, you're going to get a problem called damping off. And this is the number one biggest problem. Damping off is caused by a mushroom that lives in cold soils. It happens in our fields, in all of our fields, where like all of a sudden we can have drastic temperatures at night. And if we have those drastic temperatures at night, that little fungus just clings onto the root systems and crawls up the stem and it just wilts it over. It actually looks like it had been too dry. And this is why we end up sometimes having problems. It's just a misdiagnosis. But what's happening is the mushroom, the fungus, is getting inside the stem and causing the entire plant to die off. It means it was not able to uptake any more nutrients. It took too much water and it's just done. It's just fallen over and it will not come back. If your temperatures drop below 60 Fahrenheit, 15.5 Celsius, you will get damping off issues with almost everything that you plant, especially Brassica family, Solanaceae family. We have it happen in Swiss chard. We have it happen in lettuces. So be careful of that temperature. And this is why bottom heat is so important. I talk about in my book that you should have bottom heat with thermostat that's set at a specific temperature every night. And you should cover your seedlings, or you should keep them in if you're doing it in your house or in a spare room. Better that during seedling season, you actually dedicate a whole room so that you can do everything there. Just clear it out. It's only for a few months, and take everything out, take your computer out, take your desk out, and go ahead and just create a seeding area, especially if you have a south-facing window, and you'll really be in good shape. Now, during the day, it's just important. You really don't want the temperature to exceed maybe 80 degrees Fahrenheit or 27 degrees Celsius. It can, and sometimes it does, but if it consistently gets that warm and then consistently gets that cold when the plants are small, it's really going to stress the little seedlings out too much. When I say that with tomatoes, we really want to go ahead and we really want to be kind of a little bit mean to them. We don't really want to do that with any of the seedlings, and I've said that before. All right, continuing on. The good news is about seed starting is that it's not necessarily important for a small homesteader, even for a lot of main sales. If what you're trying to do is either store your cool room for the winter time, or if you're trying to sell a little bit. So if you're talking about things like garlic, potatoes, carrots, beets, parsnips, dry beans, peas, corn, either sweet or dry or milling corn, kale, greens, lettuce, you do not need to start them inside. You can start all of this when the temperature is right outside. So that's pretty cool. So if it's too much or you're really not having great luck, well, you really don't for a lot of crops, and you can still have yourself a great harvest, have a lot in the winter time that you can store. But you're going to miss out on some of the other really important crops that are good sales crops, as well as really important for our own vegan cuisine habits, like tomatoes, like peppers, like winter squashes. Depending on where you live, you might be able to seed winter squashes, cucumbers, and zucchinis outside. We can't here, but it's really not enough time. Only cucumbers maybe. But all of those crops are extremely important for our winter stores and also for sales. Cabbages, broccoli, celery, things that are long in the greenhouse, like celery, or just have a long enough season that you can't direct seed them outside and they come to fruition. You can do things like rapini, broccoli rabe, and even sprouting broccoli you might be able to do, but to do a nice broccoli head, if you want to freeze it, blanch it for the winter time, for those nice vegan cream of broccoli soups. Ooh, those are really good. So there you go. Also, things like onions and leeks really need to be started. Some people are starting them already. We're starting ours in a few weeks. Any other questions before I move on about any kinds of seeds? I'm more than happy to answer. If I see it, I'll answer, but we're going to go ahead and continue on. Like I said, if you have any questions, this is very complicated. I go through it extremely well in my book. Chapter, I want to say it's chapter 4, seed starting in the growing medium. I take it step by step by step. Every year we do the same, step by step by step. All right, there we go. Every year it is kind of just like that, step by step by step, and you hope that the weather cooperates with us. I did talk about that Peaceful Vegan. When do seeds expire? It depends on the varieties. Tomatoes can last 10 years, onions only 2. You can actually research this online by typing in what seed it is that you're looking for. Put it through your favorite search engine, and it'll tell you which of the seeds out there and how long they will viably last. There's also a really good book called Seed to Seed by Susan Ashworth, where she actually talks about this. She says that after a certain amount of time, when it's less than 50% viability, and when it gets less than 50% viability, you almost don't want to deal with it anymore. So onions and leeks, 2 years, 50% viability. Tomatoes up to 10 years, 50% viability. Like I said earlier in this particular show, it is all about how you keep those seeds. You need to make sure that you keep them dry, relatively cool, and out of the light. Otherwise, you're going to have problems with your seeds. So there you go. All right, so we continue on. Diversity of homestead income streams. So this is not just specifically if you want to go and start selling. This is also if you're like us and other people that I know around here that like to barter, because I really, really think like the bartering system is really important and we should really bring this back. And if we all just bartered, imagine the world we would be in. We would have no more capitalism. We would just have a barter system. That'd be great. I can barter my vegetables for electrical work, or I can barter my vegetables for the wood that I use to heat our homes. So how cool would that be? I think it would be great. Anyway, we've done a lot of that here. We've bartered vegetables for small fruits. We've bartered vegetables for veganic compost, for acupuncture treatments, for what else have we done for? For rides, for all sorts of other things. So if you have the desire and if you have the community around you, then consider what I'm going to say. Not that it's just for having sales, but also for bartering. So what makes you the most money in sales or barter for your time? Well, the fruits, vegetables, and herbs are absolutely the best. You're already growing them anyway. What you want to try and do is grow the ones that you're good at, but then you want to try to make them very pretty. Like, yeah, okay, you can sell not the most pretty carrots or not the most pretty tomatoes, but there is nothing more cool than going to your customer or the person you're trading for and offering up these just absolutely gorgeous tomatoes in exchange for whatever it is you're getting, as opposed to all your B or C grade tomatoes. So think about that. When you're growing, take your nicest ones, and those are the ones you sell. The ones that you eat for yourself are the B grade. That's what we do here. The particular fruits and veggies and herbs that are the particular fruits, vegetables, and herbs that are the most profitable for sale or barter are going to be all greens. So your salads. So wherever you live, everybody wants to have fresh salad. There is nothing like a fresh salad from a garden in comparison to what you can buy anywhere else at a grocery store. And even at a farmer's market, after a couple hours sitting out in the sun, it's wilted. It's awful. It's lost all its crunch and its water content. So salad greens harvested well. Tomatoes, heirloom tomatoes. Most farms have now gotten to this sort of hybrid, grafted greenhouse tomato grown on the nylon string. And then if you farmers are out there, if you do this, you know what I'm talking about. If you've ever worked on a farm, you know what I'm talking about. And to be honest, they're some of the most awful tomatoes I've ever tasted. They just are not that good. But they grow them because of the way that they train, of the way that they can pack them in their greenhouse, and because of the vast amounts of production that they get. But I don't really care. It's like eating styrofoam. So if you get into growing heirloom tomatoes or really tasty cherry tomatoes, they don't all have to be heirloom cherry tomatoes. They can be just open pollinated cherry tomatoes, and I actually have some really good ones out there. you're going to make as much money in barter or sales as you could ever possibly want, because people will just die to buy your tomatoes. So heirloom tomatoes. For herbs, all medicinal and culinary herbs are extremely popular. Think of things like parsley and fresh cilantro and fresh basil, but not just green basil, but purple basil and lemon basil. And my favorite, sacred basil, which is medicinal. We drink it almost every night. That lets you have wonderful dreams. It's a tonic for the entire body. Things like chamomile flowers or calendula flowers. All of these things are extremely profitable. And some of them, like chamomile, they self-seed themselves, at least up here and in the northern part of the United States. They just self-seed and self-seed, and you have chamomile plants growing everywhere. Think about these kinds of things when you're planting. Especially also small fruits, blackberries, blueberries, raspberries. If you go to a farmer's market, I know when I go to as many farmers markets as I have the time to go to, because I just think they're fun. If I see small fruits, I buy them. Like, it's that simple. I'm going to buy the red raspberries. I'm going to buy the black raspberries. I'm going to buy those beautiful looking sort of golden raspberries. So think about these kinds of things when you're planning your perennial aspects of your garden with your blueberries and your raspberries and your blackberries. If you have more knowledge, start getting into selling seeds. We do not have enough small seed sellers. We definitely do not have enough small veganic seed sellers. I mean, there's only about 4 or 5 of us in North America, and we really just need one in every state and then one in every region. So if you're into it, try it. And seeds are very, very powerful. They're very, very powerful for their, excuse me, there's Gizmo. Hi, Gizmo. For their sale or bartering possibilities. Seedlings. If you're really, really, really good at growing seedlings, after you've listened to this 4 or 5 times and you've read my book and you're like, oh, wow, I can do that. I can grow great seedlings. You can start selling seedlings. And they're an extremely possible venture. In Montreal, on 2 different occasions in 2 different years, in 2018, 2019, we sold over 2,000 seedlings in a 5-hour day. So if you have the right venue, it's a lot of work. It's a ton of expense in the beginning, and then transport of getting the seeds to whatever venue. And you really need to be close to a place where you have a lot of draw. But if you can do this, it can be extremely beneficial for you. We've even had really good luck just doing it here on the farm. We did some local advertising. We'll talk about marketing here just a minute. We had some local advertising, and people came to the farm, and we sold, I don't know, 300, 400, 500 seedlings. So it's a very, very, very good. And if you've ever bought seedlings, you know how expensive they are. So there you go. And it's an excellent thing for barter. I've exchanged in the Flagstaff Farmers Market in Arizona. I exchanged an entire year's worth of bread. It was an 18-week season at the farmers market. I got to pick up 3 loaves of bread every week, just because at the end of the season, end of the seedling season, I gave the boulangerie, the boulanger, the baker, there we go, the baker, 50 or 60 seedlings that they planted with their children, because they just thought it was important and they thought it was fun. So thinking about things differently, not just about dollars and cents, but exchange, because it's important. Dried transformation. This one is a cool one if you have the inclination. Things like dried herbs, like chamomile flowers or calendula flowers again, and any kind of dried herbs like oregano or savory or marjoram or sage or dill. These do very, very well as market items or as exchange items. Fresh transformation. Now this one's a little tougher. You kind of need to have a certified situation, a certified kitchen. Sometimes you can get away with it if you don't, but this would be things like salsa and hot sauces. And I did this before also in Arizona. But what's becoming really popular now, and it seems like every region, at least in Quebec that I've been to, and even when I went back to see my parents in California in the late fall, was kimchi and sauerkraut. And this has become extremely popular. So think about those things too. If you know how to grow cabbages, you can make your own kimchi and sauerkraut, just throw in some daikon and some carrots for the kimchi, but the recipes are out there and these are extremely popular products. You can think about having farm visits on your farm. If you find that you have a healing sanctuary, or you have a very interesting type permaculture setup. One that I was in Hawaii, it was like a circular garden. It was very, very beautiful, and it was fun for people to come and take a look and see how that kind of functioned. It was spiral, and it kind of spiraled up onto a mound. It was very, very neat with the shade-loving plants on the bottom, and then the heat and sun-loving plants on the top. Very interesting. If you create a very beautiful dynamic system, you can have people come and pay you to give them a farm visit. If you become good in any of these areas, you can become an online consultant. So you can do any kind of consultant work. Now, these are just all. The reason I bring this up is because these shows have changed. It's one thing to go have a job and work for somebody else and you make your paycheck and then you come home and you play in your garden, or maybe you're retired, but these are just things to augment your income. Now, I'm not saying you're going to make every dollar that you need, and you may not, but it is possible that, depending, if you take a few of these together, just like our gardens, just like when we plant our flowers, we're looking for a diversity of plantings. We want to also try to create a diversity of income streams for our homestead. You can think about writing if you're into something like that, or maybe you play music. Now, here's two that I think are really cool. Compost making. What we need are seed starting mixes, and we need veganic compost. Now, if you have a little bit of extra space, making veganic compost is not that complicated. Sometimes you do need a tractor just to help turn it, depending on what you're making. But if we can get regional compost makers, well, geez, then everybody who wants to grow veganically would have access to veganic compost. And liquid plant-based fertilizers. This is making fermentations of plants, especially perennial plants like comfrey, nettles, yarrow, clover, a combination of all that make a very strong tonic, either foliar feed or liquid fertilizer for your plants. In France, they actually sell jugs of stinging nettle fertilizer at their nurseries. Now, we're not into that here, and it's just because that agriculture is so dominated by the chemical companies that we don't have these really beneficial products that are growing all around us. It makes absolutely no sense to me how it works, but we can do this ourselves. If you can create a way to bottle it, it smells bad, but if you can create a way to bottle it already diluted at whatever ratio is necessary, so 15-1 or 20-1, then you can create these liquid plant-based fertilizers. So how do you get all this information out there? How do you even begin to try to think about having barter exchange or starting to have sales? Or how do you even, now, if you're already farming, maybe you already have these things, but here are some other ideas that you might have. So if you're a farmer, you probably already have already have a face in your community, but if you don't, you need to. Now, here in Videle, we're a really small town. There's maybe 450 people that live here, and there's things that we tried that just didn't work at all. We were given at the Hotel de Ville at the town offices, we were given a space for an afternoon to have a seed exchange and seed sale. And there only 3 people came, and we sent out mailings to the entire town. So we sent out 150 or 175 by the mail to the entire town, and we only had 3 people come. And we decided that was it. That was enough. It just, there wasn't the demand. But if you don't try, you don't know. And so, yeah, it cost us a day's worth of time, and it cost us maybe $30 or $40 for the postage for sending out a little half-page ad. But then we knew. However, on the flip side, we also have a farm kiosk where we sell our vegetables. We used to do it on Saturday mornings, and now we do it on Friday mornings. And lo and behold, we would have 10, 12, 14 people come on the Saturday. And then when it switched over to Friday afternoon, a little less, but we'd have 8, 9, 10, 12. So for us, in exchange or sales, making $350 or $400 every Friday afternoon at our own place made a lot of sense. So if you don't have a farm kiosk, you might be able to have it. But it's all about establishing yourself in your community. Get involved with your community. Have your city council people know who you are. Your mayor knows who we are. Our mayor knows us by name. You just need to just put yourself out there just a little bit. You don't need to be friends with everybody because of course they're not vegan, but you do want to have the community, if they're going to already get their veggies from somewhere, you want them to get them from you. Because anytime a non-vegan buys from a vegan, well, then they're supporting a vegan cause and they may not even know it. No, that's just a great moment. Okay. The second best way to actually get yourself known and established is to put yourself in a farmer's market. Now, you can't just go to a farmer's market with your product, go once or twice and call it good. You have to make the effort to go for an entire year. You're going to need to go every week during the season, sign up for the whole season. You may not do all that well, or you may do fantastic. You never know. But if this is something, if you want to diversify your income, if you want to try to make a living, at least somewhat, from what you're doing, then again, you have to put yourself out there. And a farmer's market is already established. There's already people coming. Usually they're very low priced. Here, they're actually free in some locations. And if you don't have one, you can band together and put one together. You can band together and start one. All you need is a few farmers and maybe somebody who bakes bread and somebody who makes some sort of vegan cheese and somebody sells some plants, and there you go. You have yourself a little farmer's market. Things to think about. In urban areas, this is super cool. I think that every block could have their own weekly farm stand. There's no reason why not. You could even wild harvest from the fruits. Anyway, there's so many ideas out there about what can be done and how we can augment, how we exchange with each other, how we cooperate with each other, and ultimately how we interact with the entire world around us in such a more beneficial way. You can join a social club. You can get people to know you by word of mouth. Usually our customers were friends first. Here in Quebec, we didn't know anybody when we moved here. So our entire business was based on word of mouth from one person, and then 2 people, and then 3 people, and then 50 people, and there you go. The same with our seedling sale in Montreal. The first year, I think we had 50 customers, and then we did a sort of a mass marketing campaign, and people came, and every year they would continue to come. Even not doing it for 3 years, we still had people. When I did a conference at the Vegan Festival in Montreal Vegan Festival in this October, we had people that were coming then in 2019 that were asking me 3 years later if we were going to go back. So people remember, the key to it all is to have a quality product, superior and friendly service. Always be nice, always be friendly, always smile. There's so many people out there that don't, that if you give people a smile, you'll be so happy. And make it be a price that people can afford. Farmers markets are expensive. Veganic products should not be as expensive. We're not using as much of the inputs as organic growers are. And if we keep it small, then we're just paying ourselves, and we can keep it a little cheaper. But make it be so that really think of yourself. If you're not a wealthy person, we're not wealthy people, I would want to go and be able to buy what it is that I'm selling. And I can't justify. So last year we sold our carrots for $3 a bunch. The bigger farms are selling them for $4. I can't justify buying carrots for $4 a bunch. Think about that when you go. I don't sell my produce, but I had so many buttermelon squash last year. I almost brought to food bank, but ended up using or giving away. Well, either way, you can take it to the food bank. I've done that too. Depending on where you live, you can consider getting involved in some sort of community clubs, social clubs. So yeah, think about being creative with it. I mean, it does require forward thinking. Sometimes you're like, oh my God, I have all this produce. Well, but think about creative ways of getting it to the people that need it the most. But if you ended up using it all or giving it away to people that needed it, it's perfect. $1 difference is a hard justification. I don't really know what you meant by that statement, but please Say it again. Dollar difference is a hard justification. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, for me, it was a hard justification. If you, again, if it's $3 or $4 for me, $3 is just something that I would pay. There we go. Yeah. I don't know. For me, it would be. Now imagine yourself. Like our carrots, they're gorgeous, and we charge $3. The carrots that I saw for $4 weren't as nice looking. I just couldn't go that high. I just thought it was expensive. Same with heirloom tomatoes. Our heirloom tomatoes for a really long time were $3.50, and then they went to $4. So I'm running over a little bit, so I'm going to answer your question to go. I have to use a food bank. We rarely get fresh produce. Please consider giving to food banks versus giving away to friends who can afford. There you go. If you have a food bank that needs it, maybe there's people in your community that need it. I see what you're all saying. These are just things to think about for yourself. Think about what works for you. Maybe you live in an environment where a $3 bunch of carrots or a $4 bunch of carrots isn't really that big of a deal. And Catherine says $3 is very reasonable for top quality veganically grown carrots. Yeah, maybe $4 would be too. It's just, again, it's my personal feeling that I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't charge my customers $1 extra. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just because I'm conscious that way. But it doesn't matter. If you feel like you can get $4 and you feel it's a good value, get it. It's not really about the dollar. It's about, there you go. It's about figuring it out. There you go. Yeah, that's it. The location matters 100%. I'm in a rural town. Maybe in the bigger cities you can do more. Really just depends. Coming events. I need to sign off. I can't be on forever. I would love to. You guys are amazing. Coming events. March 4th. If any of you are around in Ottawa, I'm doing a book signing at Ron Colbus Lakeside Center on the Ottawa River, March 4th from 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock. You can bring a copy of my book you've already bought and I'll sign it. We can rap. We can talk about veganics. Tell me what you like or didn't like about it. Or you can buy one there. I will have copies available. 2 weeks later, March 18th, I'm doing another book signing in Val-David, Quebec, a little town not far from us. Another book signing from 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock. So one Saturday and then the next Saturday, every other Saturday at the Central Church in picturesque Val-David, Quebec. So if you're around, come take a look. And our next show, March 30th, making veganic compost, the key to all of our happy plants in our fields, choosing the right irrigation system because they all need the right amount of water. So as always, thank you. I'm sorry to have cut it short. Your questions at the end are awesome. And I love having these kinds of conversations, but I really do need to run. Thank you as always for spending time with us. I love your comments. I'm glad you're here. Sign up to my YouTube show. You can watch all of my old shows for free. Ask me any questions you want through veganicgrower@gmail.com. And anyway, the next one's March 30th or at the 2 book signings. And I hope to see you all soon. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day.